Halo 4 was a transitional game for the Halo franchise. It was 343 Industries' first installment in the series, yet it served as a goodbye to the Halo of old, mainly Chief and Cortana's relationship. With the end of Halo 4 came the promise that the series would be venturing into uncharted waters. After having moved from the legacy that came before, 343 would take the series in their own direction. Initially, the studio hooked players in with their compelling Hunt the Truth marketing campaign. Unfortunately though, this marketing campaign didn't reflect the actual game. Halo 5 was received as a massive disappointment, and 343's vision didn't land as anybody would have hoped. Halo 5's campaign is the most reviled in the entire series. I think you could make a sound argument that it's one of the most hated campaigns of all time, especially when you consider the pedigree of the franchise it came from. Years ago, I bought an Xbox specifically for Halo 5, and yet I entirely avoided the campaign because of all the bad things I had heard about it. Even though I fell in love with the multiplayer mode, I still hadn't touched the campaign up until now. Well, I finally took the leap, and I peeled back the layers of Halo 5's story, its gameplay, its art direction, and so on. So do I think it's as bad as people say? It's more complicated, certainly. The campaign has flickers of brilliance throughout. There are ideas, both story and gameplay-wise, which I find very captivating. However, the flaws run deep, and they are undeniable, and they all trace back to a single fundamental flaw, whose tendrils wrap around all the game's elements in a chokehold. So let's get started. We'll walk through the campaign and explore the game's various elements. We'll see how they work together, and how they work against each other. Finally, we'll land on the game's fundamental flaw. So grab your helmet, Spartan, and let's dive in. Halo 5 opens with a cutscene, where Dr. Halsey addresses Jameson Locke, our new co-protagonist, and it ends with intrigue.
Once this is over, after all I have done, they'll order you to kill us both.
The cutscene successfully establishes a sense of mystery, which is a focus in the opening hours of the campaign. This cutscene also establishes that, despite Halo 4's ending, Cortana's role in Halo's story isn't over. Not yet. The story transitions to Spartan Jameson Locke and his team Osiris. This isn't Osiris' first appearance. They were also featured in a TV show called Halo Nightfall, which bridges the gap between Halo 4 and 5. The 343 Halo games have a tendency to rely on outside media to tell their stories, which I'm not a fan of. I think the story of a video game-centric series should be reliant on the games themselves. External sources should be supplemental, not required viewing, so I'm going to treat them as such. With that in mind, for many players, this is Osiris' introduction. That is with the exception of Spartan Edward Buck, who's one of the ODSTs in Halo ODST. He's one of my favorite characters in the series, and it's welcome to see a familiar face. We don't get much of their individual characters right away. Team Osiris is down to business. Their mission is to recover Dr. Halsey from a Covenant warlord named Jul 'Mdama. There have been Forerunner attacks that Halsey has information on, so recovering her is crucial. This lack of character development is fine for now. Both ODST and Reach introduced us to a fresh new team without much context, and it worked out well for those games. In theory, the same approach could have worked for Halo 5. We'll see though how its execution plays out. The Spartans deploy, and we get a long cinematic of Osiris fighting through the Covenant. This cutscene is made fun of a lot by the Halo community for being over the top. While it's a bit cheesy, I don't think it's the worst thing in the world. It shows the competency of the team, and it's good at amping the player up for gameplay. Many of the moves that the Spartans pull off are things you can do in-game with the Spartan abilities, which is pretty cool. I'll dive much more into gameplay later though. We take the shoes of Spartan Locke and gameplay begins. One thing that's immediately striking is how much effort and detail has gone into the environments, and this is a point I will continue to make throughout the video. In this level, there's so much happening in the background while you fight. A sea of Covenant ships war in the air, with explosions erupting and tracer rounds flying about. The chaos and activity really sells the scale of battle in a way few other Halo games match. It's framed really well by a looming Covenant cruiser and Forerunner structure. There is attention to the use of color, with an almost painterly effect. The environments of Halo 5 are composed like paintings, but they're given life and vibrancy through the movement. Halo 5's art direction is very controversial. It strays far from the boots-on-the-ground aesthetic of its predecessors. Spartans look less like soldiers and more like Power Rangers. The Covenant look more round and less threatening. However, when you look at these complaints, most of them are focused on character design. For me, it's a shame that the environmental design isn't given the credit it deserves. Throughout the level, we get a bit more background on both Osiris and Jul 'Mdama.
How'd you learn to speak Sangheli, Vale? When I was a kid, I was stuck on a diplomatic shuttle adrift in deep space for 6 months. My options were be real bored or spend the time getting smart. Must have dealt a blow to Mdama's authority when the Prometheans turned on him. Gained a lot of followers, styling himself as a forerunner prophet.
Jul 'Mdama is an opportunist, not a leader.
Overall, I feel this exposition is decently done. It feels like we're getting to know the Spartans a little bit, and there's enough info on the villain for the player to not feel completely lost. The Spartans recover Halsey, and they take out the Covenant warlord. The doctor lost her arm, which is a bit jarring. It was mentioned earlier by the Spartans, but it feels like just one more small thing that happened off screen that the player needs to take into account. It's small, but along with the introduction of Osiris' team, it feels like there's this cumulative effect that you're missing something as the player. It feels like you're coming in 30 minutes late to the start of a movie. When Halsey is brought back to safety, she has a discussion with Lasky and it's urgent.
Captain Lasky, I sent you my position 3 weeks ago. I told you this was happening.
We'll discuss that in private, Doctor. Calm her.
What has she done? How far has it already gone?
Based on the introduction, the player can surmise that Halsey is talking about Cortana, or at least something related to her. This builds intrigue, because Cortana is still dead as far as we know. In its opening hours, Halo 5 does a pretty decent job of building suspense about its central mystery. The thing about mysteries though, is that they're pretty contingent on the quality and execution of their revelations. The story transitions to the game's other principal perspective, that of Blue Team led by Master Chief. The team is composed of the Chief, Fred, Kelly, and Linda. It follows the same pattern as Osiris. This is a team whose members have been introduced in other media. For instance, I read The Fall of Reach, so I recognize all of the Blue Team members. However, their introduction in the game is jarring. They treat Chief like old war buddies, which yes, canonically they are, but for fans who have only played the games, it feels very abrupt. We've played 4 other games with Master Chief, with nary a mention of his old comrades. He's always been portrayed as a loner, especially in Halo 4, yet now here he is with a group of buddies. I feel like there needed to be some sort of introductory cutscene here, something more to explain Chief's transition from being fully alone to reuniting with his old squad. I feel like that additional context would have gone a long way towards easing the player into Blue Team. But herein lies Halo 5's great challenge. It has 2 entirely separate squads that it wants the player to identify and bond with over the span of a campaign, which has a short runtime. In my Halo Reach retrospective, I spoke about how difficult that task is with just 1 squad. Is it possible to do with 2? Well, we'll see. Anyways, continuing on. When they arrive at their objective, Linda gives more background on the mission.
Oni Research Station. Went dark 19 months ago. Last week, Kigyar scavengers found it and sold the find to Jul 'Mdama's people.
We clear the Covenant and return this station to Oni.
It's a simple objective. Given everything else the player has to take in with Halo 5, I appreciate a more straightforward mission. This is one of my favorite levels in the game too. It feels like it perfectly complements Halo 5's combat design. I'll delve more into it later, but I just can't help myself. Chief suddenly is drawn into a vision. The sense of mystery builds. Chief saw Cortana die. Is this the true Cortana, and if so, how is she still alive? Cortana seems welcoming, but Halsey's prior fear gives this cutscene an ominous air.
You said she was gone.
I watched her die. We have a mission to focus on. We can talk about this later. Lights on.
In typical Chief fashion, he doesn't want to talk about it, and instead wants to push on with their mission. More Covenant are inbound, so instead of salvaging the station, they opt to destroy it. When the mission is complete, Chief heads to Meridian in hunt of Cortana to see if she's truly alive. He does this in direct opposition to the UNSC's orders. Here we see some character growth from Halo 4. In that game, it was a big moment when Chief disobeyed a direct order. Now he does so without a second thought. There are some other signs of Chief's personality change from the events of Halo 4. At the beginning of the mission, Fred expresses concern that Chief is pressing himself too hard.
I haven't seen Chief press himself like this since we were in boot camp.
He's fine, Fred.
This many missions non-stop isn't fun.
This is likely an expression of his grief after the loss of Cortana. He is throwing himself into his work. Chief plans on finding Cortana on his own, but Blue Team joins him. They're loyal to their leader no matter the cost. The members of Blue Team are likable enough at this point, if unremarkable. Perspective switches back to Halsey. She confirms that Cortana is the entity she fears and that she's a danger to the entire galaxy.
The Master Chief believes she contacted him.
No, John must not speak to her.
He's gone in search of her.
Let him go.
How is it
Nobody lets the chief do anything. He does what he wants.
Until 0631 this morning, when he was declared absent without leave.
This isn't about the Master
John
Chief.
is not equipped emotionally to deal with her as a threat.
Hey! Is anyone gonna answer me?
I think this is a really interesting dynamic. Halsey wants Chief detained, not because she thinks he's a threat personally, but because she's afraid that Cortana will break him. She hunts him not to persecute him, but to protect him. The story has done a good job of formulating a bunch of questions. From this cutscene, we have a few more. Why is Halsey so certain Cortana's a threat? What has she found out? And is she right? Is it good or bad that Chief is going after her? The prompting of these questions, I think, make the core mystery fairly compelling, and it certainly motivated me to continue playing. Buck and Locke prepare to go after Chief. Buck is very unhappy about these orders, but Locke is very stoic.
Every other Spartan, every soldier, when they hear about this, they're gonna hate us. You know that, right?
You're not the only one here because of him.
I love this interaction. There's just such a weight to Locke. With how stoic he is, I expected him to give a defense like that they're just following orders, or that Chief needs to be leashed. Instead, he acknowledges that he owes Chief a debt, and he gives no defense for his actions. I find this really interesting because it's not the reaction you'd expect, and it made me want to learn more about his character and personality. Like I talked about earlier with Chief, there are these small hints of complexity and nuance with the characters. The game, however, never really gives them time to develop. Osiris heads to Meridian in search of Blue Team. Meridian is an indie human colony. Human settlements on other worlds have been talked about throughout the Halo franchise, but we've only really gotten to witness Reach and Earth in-game. Later on, we get to explore another world discussed in the lore. Halo 5 gives us a more expanded view of the Halo universe, and that's something I appreciate. Prometheans have also arrived on Meridian, although their goals are not yet clear. They're attacking Meridian Station and giving the settlers a hard time, but Governor Sloan is skeptical of the Spartans. Overall, the colony planet is very skeptical of the UNSC. This disdain for the UNSC is a through line from other games, as we saw similar attitudes in Reach. Sloan reluctantly opens the bridge for the Spartans, so they can help his people en route to the city. Along the way, we're treated to some more visuals. Once again, Guardians is great at creating a sense of scale and awe, and its environments are rendered with this painterly feel that resembles concept art. It's really well done. Sloan allows the Spartans into the city after they rescue his people. Here we discover that Sloan is actually an AI and he's suffering from rampancy. It's the same deterioration that affects all AIs, and Cortana's affliction with it was the focus of Halo 4. I love this concept, and it makes perfect sense for the world. With how capable the AIs are, it makes sense that a colony would let themselves be run by one. But what happens when that AI starts to naturally deteriorate? Will it step down? Well, in Sloan's case, he wants to hold on to power as long as he can. It's a really compelling setup, and I think an entire game or movie could have been built from this premise. Unfortunately, this idea isn't developed much in Halo 5. There is just this small set of levels, and the focus of the story moves away quickly. There is a sighting of Blue Team at Apogee Station, so Osiris heads there. They come across a mine, and Locke asks for permission to enter. Sloan is argumentative, but eventually he grants them access. As they ride the elevator down, Osiris contemplates the situation. Things aren't adding up.
This place is huge. Why wouldn't Sloan report a find of this size? Mother hell.
Knocker?
Just realized. Buck was saying Blue Team didn't fight Prometheans. Well, they didn't have to sweet-talk Sloan either. You think Sloan let them down here? Reckon it's a possibility.
Halo 5 continues to build the mystery around Cortana. What's she planning? If Chief is going along with her, then there's still the flicker of hope that she has good motives. They run into the Warden Eternal, who tries to stop them from going further. He claims to be Cortana's protector. This begins a boss fight, which is a fine encounter, for now at least. I'll get more into the Warden later on. Once the Warden is defeated, Osiris at last encounters Blue Team. What follows is one of the most maligned cutscenes in the game. For some context, Halo 5's marketing material pitched a big standoff between Chief and Locke. In-game, however, all we get is an anticlimactic scuffle between Chief and Locke, which amounts to a half-hearted draw. I don't despise this cutscene as much as I've seen others do, but I have some key problems with it. First, I feel like Locke is being fairly reasonable, asking Chief to come in or explain himself. Chief, on the other hand, is just a stone wall, refusing to cooperate or even talk with Locke. I get that Chief isn't exactly a bastion of communication, and he's more skeptical of the UNSC than ever, especially when it comes to Cortana, but still. It feels like he could have at least said something. His behavior just feels contrived here to create a battle between him and Locke. Speaking of contrived, why do the other Spartans just sit and watch as Chief and Locke fight? Why did they silently agree to watch a gladiator match? It feels like they would either be helping their leaders fight or fighting each other as well. You can criticize the choreography of the fight itself all you want, but this is the real standout point to me. The clash ends with Blue Team getting away and entering the Guardian, while Locke and his Spartans are forced to flee. Sloan issues evac orders in response to the Guardian activation. The Spartans suspect he's been allied with Cortana this whole time. Vale puts 2 and 2 together. The prior Forerunner attacks? The same thing is happening here on Meridian. The activation of the Guardian will result in the planet becoming a crater. Osiris races to exfil, fighting Prometheans along the way. After convincing Sloan to open the space elevator for them, Osiris confronts him about Cortana.
She gave me fair warning, true enough. I was allowed to help my people survive. A change is gonna come. For all of us, human and created alike. She's bringing a new dawn, and I intend to be part of it.
We're getting more pieces to the puzzle here. He believes in a new dawn she offers, one for humanity and created alike. What the created are can be deduced by Sloan. There's hope in his voice, and it's evident that this new dawn applies to him personally as well. It seems that the created are AIs like himself and Cortana. Her plan isn't entirely clear yet, but the consequences are. If she's able to activate another Guardian on a planet, then it's likely that the inhabitants will either be killed or rendered homeless as well. Team Osiris needs to stop her, with or without Blue Team. They discover that the Sangheli homeworld Sanghelios has a Guardian. They devise that they can use the Guardian to transport them to the same place that Chief's team went. Unfortunately, Sanghelios is in the midst of a civil war. Osiris' team doesn't let this stop them though, so they head to the elite homeworld. This marks a turning point in the story, and also a good breaking point to discuss combat. And man, there's a lot I want to get into. Halo 5 plays very differently to its predecessors, and this is mainly due to the new Spartan abilities. They're kind of like armor abilities from prior games, but they're always available. These are things like the thruster pack, ground pound, charge, hover, etc. They're woven directly into your base combat kit. For instance, you can hold melee while sprinting to charge, or hold melee in the air to ground pound. You can aim in the air to activate the hover stabilizer. Thrust is given its own dedicated button with a cooldown. The seamlessness of these new abilities is great. Very quickly they become second nature. They feel very smooth and well integrated into your base kit, and they feel like a natural extension of your capabilities. They do give Halo 5 a very different feel than its predecessors. Halo's combat design has always been centered around what others have dubbed its combat triangle: your gun, melee, and grenade. There is a delicate balance struck between these abilities, and knowing when to use each one really drove the gameplay experience. It's one of those things that's hard to fully get across in words, but the focus on this combat triangle gave Halo a very unique flow. When playing Halo, you fall into a particular rhythm. The addition of all these new Spartan abilities somewhat upsets the combat triangle. With all these new abilities, it inherently changes that rhythm. This isn't bad necessarily, it's just different. And if Halo fans are coming to Halo for a particular gameplay feel, it makes sense why the changes are so controversial. In addition, at the time of Halo 5's release, advanced movement was the latest trend in shooters. This was the jetpack era of Call of Duty, along with the breakout of games like Titanfall. So these gameplay changes weren't viewed at the time as innovative, but rather derivative. Halo 5's take on advanced movement isn't everyone's cup of tea, but it's certainly mine. I'm super biased because I love advanced movement shooters. Titanfall 2 is my favorite multiplayer shooter of all time. I just love the feel of Halo 5's movement, and I think they did a great job of integrating the new abilities. I would say Halo 5 has my favorite movement system after Titanfall, and coming from a huge fan of these types of games, I consider that really high praise. There are other significant gameplay changes to Halo 5. The Promethean faction has had an overhaul from Halo 4. Halo 4 had 3 basic enemy units: the Knights, Dogs, and Drones. The Knights were the primary unit, but their abilities weren't conducive to serving in this role. The Knights teleported, and they often had short range and high damage weapons, so you were primarily fighting enemies that teleported around the arena. As a result, Halo 4's combat didn't really have a feeling of flow. It felt very disjointed when fighting the Prometheans. Halo 5 rectifies this by introducing a new soldier faction. The Knights are reserved for almost mini-boss encounters. The Prometheans, as a result, feel so much better to fight against. They feel more similar to the Covenant, while at the same time remaining distinct. So with the improved Promethean faction design and the new Spartan movement, you might think Halo 5 is a net improvement over its predecessor, right? Well, not quite. Halo 5's combat system has other mechanics that undercut its movement systems. This is why I wanted to spend so much time on the combat, because it sheds a light into the same fundamental issue that plagues this story. The combat system suffers from a lack of focus and direction. Halo 5 leans into squad mechanics. Unfortunately, the implementation and balance of these mechanics undercut the movement system. In Halo 5, you have a squad of AI teammates to fight with you, Osiris or Blue Team depending on who you're playing as. They have the ability to revive you, and you have the ability to revive them. These mechanics incentivize you to work together and play as a squad, and the game is tuned around this. I haven't crunched the numbers, but I felt a lot more squishy in this game than prior ones. This might not be caused by a numerical health difference, but it could instead be due to the Prometheans' aggression and more precise weapons, but the effect is the same either way. I felt like I went down quicker in Halo 5. When you go into a down state, the AI teammates aren't super reliable at reviving you, which means it's often better to play near them so they can pick you up. This dissuades you from pushing farther ahead with your advanced movement and playing at a slower pace. If you ground slam a group of enemies far from your squad, chances are they can't get you back up. These issues really start to manifest when you increase the difficulty. For this retrospective, I played through the campaign on normal. Normal difficulty gives me a sense for the combat, while also leaving me enough mental bandwidth to focus on other elements of the game like story and environmental design. On normal difficulty, the game feels amazing. You can use all of your Spartan abilities effectively, and your AI teammates are generally more helpful than they are harmful. They revived me more than I had to revive them. Cranking the difficulty to legendary really exposes all the issues I've talked about. Because of the enemy's accuracy and damage, combined with the limitations of your AI teammates, you're entirely dissuaded from using many of your Spartan abilities. The hover and the ground pound both require you to be stationary in the air, and you get completely melted from enemies even attempting to use them. Your AI teammates seem to die instantly, and they get mowed down before they can revive you. Instead of instilling camaraderie, the mechanics create a sense of frustration over your squad mates. I know I'm not the best Halo player, and my complaint isn't about Legendary's difficulty. Not exactly. It's about how the balance around squad mechanics and making you more vulnerable entirely conflicts with the Spartan abilities. In a game like Doom, increasing the difficulty forces you to engage more with the mechanics. In order to win, you need to use glory kills more, you need to use tools like the freeze and flamethrower more, and you need to use your entire weapon arsenal. You don't use these mechanics less. In contrast with Halo 5, Legendary incentivizes you to engage less with its movement abilities and play it more like a passive cover shooter. It's this fundamental clash in design which makes Halo 5 feel like it's trying to be two different types of game. I think your perception of Halo 5's combat is largely based on what difficulty you play it on. I can see why someone who started on Legendary would come to hate this combat system. Meanwhile, on normal difficulty, I had a blast. So that's my big diversion on combat. I think it's important though, because it's a critical example of Halo 5's lack of focus and coherent vision. With all that said, let's move back to the story. The Guardian takes Blue Team to the mysterious Forerunner world named Genesis. This planet has a really unique visual design. There are these winding structures that look both stony but also tree-like. Overall, I find it pretty imaginative. They fight through Covenant that were also pulled through slip space with the Guardians. Blue Team encounters the Warden Eternal, the same guy that Osiris Team fought. He really takes the Eternal title seriously. The Warden is really protective of Cortana, and he says that she's changed. Soon enough, Blue Team gets to make that judgment for themselves. Finally, they establish contact with Cortana.
John, you made it! Oh my... I can't believe you're here.
Where are we?
I will say, given the amount of emphasis Halo 4 put on Chief and Cortana's relationship, their reunion feels super anticlimactic. Chief doesn't really even say he's glad to see that she's alive. On one hand, it makes sense. After everything he's been hearing about her from the Warden, and the damage the Guardians have already caused, it makes sense that he'd be a bit cagey about her. But still, this is Cortana we're talking about. As Blue Team talks more with her, the conversation grows more ominous despite her upbeat tone.
Cortana, why does the Warden think he needs to protect you from me?
There's so much to explain. It'll be easier when we're face to face.
Try me.
The cure for rampancy I've found means AIs can be immortal. That kind of lifespan allows for long-term planning, just like the Forerunners were capable of. AIs can assume the Forerunner's mantle of responsibility. And once there is peace, we can focus on poverty, hunger, illness. But Warden believes some will resist our help. And he's afraid you're one of them.
Sounds great. I don't get why anyone's expecting resistance.
The Didact made it clear the mantle of responsibility was an Imperial piece. Step out of line and suffer.
It won't be like that, John. I'll explain it better once we're together.
It's becoming more evident that Cortana is in fact the villain of this story. Even Chief is coming around to it. As their story progresses, I'll get more into this transformation. Another thing I want to talk about is the game's suspense. The sense of mystery that the game has built up pretty much entirely vanishes at this point. There are smaller reveals later, but that building suspense is gone. For all of that build-up, the mystery almost feels forgotten about. The game essentially establishes here that, yeah, Cortana's the bad guy, and then the storytelling changes gear. It moves away from the suspense. It's a bit of a bummer because I thought the mystery build-up was fairly well done, and it's sad that it feels like the mystery didn't capstone with a sense of payoff. There isn't that feeling of grand revelation, if that makes sense. Without payoff, the prior mystery feels somewhat aimless. They finally reach the Forerunner domain, and they enter to reach Cortana and get more answers. Meanwhile, Osiris meets with the Sangheli and prepares to enter their home world. Locke has conversations with Vale and Lasky.
So, you wrote a target dossier on the Arbiter when you were with Tony.
That was 6 years ago. What's your point?
You recommended assassinating him.
After he killed millions of our people.
So why didn't you?
Things changed.
Locke. Planet's deep in civil war. If this all goes sideways...
I understand, sir. It's not my first mission that doesn't exist.
Good luck, Spartan.
In isolation, I like Locke. He's taciturn, but by the way he speaks and through his tone, it always feels like there's a lot he's pondering but leaving unsaid. I think he's fairly intriguing. However, when you stack him up against Chief, there are a lot of similarities. They're both big, quiet guys who have always had more behind their words than the words themselves. Chief's dynamic with Cortana is more compelling, so at times Locke feels like a watered-down version of Chief. The series already had a great dual protagonist setup with the Arbiter in Halo 2. The reason that worked so well is because the Arbiter was so markedly different from Chief. He had an entirely different worldview and philosophy, and I felt like his perspective added a whole new dynamic. Unfortunately, we don't get that with Locke. Chief is still the blank slate of the series in a lot of ways, so the game had an opportunity to take Locke in a different direction. Unfortunately, he's kind of a blank slate too. I wish the game had given him the space and time to differentiate more from Master Chief. Unfortunately, Halo 5 has so much going on, I just don't think it had the bandwidth to do so. Osiris reaches Sanghelios and heads after the Arbiter. I think it's so cool that we finally get to visit the elite homeworld in this game. Like I mentioned about Meridian before, I really appreciate how Halo 5 gives us a look at Halo's extended universe, giving us a glimpse into places discussed previously in the lore. I find the Covenant Civil War so interesting and I wanted to learn more. Similar to Governor Sloan and his rampancy, I think you could have created an entire game centered around this war. Unfortunately though, we only get a glimpse of it in Halo 5. There are too many other plot points spinning. This mission also sees the return of the Mantis, which I was happy about. The Mantis is one of my favorite vehicles in the game. Osiris reaches the Arbiter, and Locke has a tense exchange with him. Arbiter is skeptical of Locke and his past, namely when he volunteered to execute the Arbiter. That, of course, is understandable. However, I also appreciate some of the subtle character work here. Arbiter still speaks about the Master Chief with a level of respect that he doesn't afford the other humans. He is extra skeptical that Locke is hunting him. Cortana announces her presence, declaring that they'll never find her. With her reveal comes added urgency. She knows the Guardian is here too, and they need to beat her to it. Sunayan is the Covenant's final stronghold. The Arbiter will only move in on it when they're ready to commence the final battle. Meanwhile, Halsey has discovered a way to activate the Guardian. They need a constructor from one of the Forerunner Sentinels on the planet. Osiris' team heads there to retrieve it. During the journey, they fight a Kraken in an epic battle. I really like this segment as it reminds me of fighting the Scarabs throughout the classic series. They retrieve the constructor just in time for the Arbiter's forces to head to Sunayan. Before Locke deploys, Halsey stops him.
You know what I did to create the Spartans, all in the name of the greater good.
Doctor, we don't have time.
Cortana is built from a matrix of my own mind. The domain gives her incredible power.
I understand.
Spartan Locke! Stop her! But please, bring John home to me.
I like this conversation. Halsey tries to justify her actions, but Locke isn't interested in discussing it. As we saw with Locke previously when he talked with Buck about the Master Chief, when he's given an order, he follows through on it. He doesn't question the right or wrongness of it, and he doesn't care to hear Halsey's self-justifications. In her, we also see a concern for the Master Chief. Despite her coldness, she does in fact seem to have some level of genuine care for him. The Spartans reach the Covenant City, and they engage in the final battle of this war. Sunayan is such a cool setting. The bulbous buildings look very fitting for the Covenant, given the architecture of their ships, yet the setting still evokes a feeling of imagination. The buildings loom high amidst the backdrop of an ocean that stretches endlessly, illuminated by a sun heading to slumber. The sky is alight with activity, with Covenant banshees and other aircraft dogfighting. It creates that large-scale epic feeling, like this war is being fought by more than just Osiris. As I've been talking about, Halo 5's art direction is amazing at creating a sense of wonder and scale. It's also cool to fight alongside the Arbiter. In Halo 3, he fought alongside us on Earth. Now we get to fight with him on his own world. It's a cool parallel. When the battle starts to wrap up, Osiris heads for the Guardian. Promethean forces attempt to stop him, and this culminates in yet another Warden Eternal fight. One of the common complaints about Halo 5 is its overuse of the Warden Eternal. You fight him a total of 7 times throughout the campaign, which is excessive. However, I think the bigger problem than the sheer repetition is how it reduces the Warden Eternal's threat. He tries to come across as this big, imposing threat, but how is he supposed to feel threatening after you've already beaten him 4 times? He starts to feel like an ineffectual joke, which then diminishes the threat of the Prometheans as a whole. After the Warden Eternal is defeated yet again, the Spartans activate the Guardian and reach Genesis. There's a pretty cool segment where the Spartans run down a Forerunner structure with the backdrop of the planet before you. The jumping mechanics slightly change, and every leap feels like a rappelled descent. When they touch down on solid ground, Locke contacts the Chief.
Chief, Dr. Halsey sent us. We're here to help you.
How the hell are you here?
Long story, sir. Cortana has been activating Forerunner.
Where? We're at the gateway.
With how closed off and hostile Chief can be, he can come across as a jerk in this game. Osiris gets help from a Forerunner monitor named the Exuberant Witness, and they head off to find Chief. They fight through the Forerunner defenses, which, surprise, ends in yet another Warden Eternal boss fight. At last, Osiris reaches Blue Team. However, this time, Osiris comes peacefully.
Chief, please, wait. Cortana.
She's dangerous. I know.
You don't have to do this alone. We're here to help you.
The important thing to note about this cutscene is that Chief has fully accepted that Cortana is a threat and needs to be dealt with. It feels like this change occurred off screen. During the last Blue Team mission, he still largely had hope that she could be brought home. Cortana arrives and whisks Blue Team away. She's granted them an audience. However, the Warden Eternal is still adamant on protecting her, so Blue Team has to fight through more Promethean forces. Along the way, Cortana attempts to talk with Chief, but he isn't having any of it.
It's so good to see you again, John. So good to see all of you back together as a family.
Psychological tactics. Saying my name. Playing nice.
What would you have me do?
Tell me the truth. How many people died when you called the Guardians here?
Excuse me?
You know, don't you? The exact body count.
Chief is now full bore against Cortana. It feels like such a pivot, and he doesn't have any internal debate about it. Why didn't we get more of this character development in-game? While Blue Team fights, the Warden Eternal and Cortana reveal more about the overarching plan.
Your species' ego led you to believe the task of reclamation would fall to you. Yet humanity were but the creators. The reclamation of the Forerunner Empire is the task of the created.
Essentially, AIs like Cortana, the created, are meant to ascend and claim the Forerunner Empire's power. They are to impose peace upon the galaxy, whether its denizens want that peace or not, and they're to use the Guardian and Promethean forces to do so. Through her and the Warden's conversation, she does seem to hold some reservation about hurting humanity or others, but it doesn't seem to be enough to stop her. Overall, Cortana's still pretty enthusiastic about the plan. It's such a weird character shift. In the prior Halo games, as far as I can recall, we never really saw an urge from Cortana to rule or hold power over anyone. The gap between that Cortana and the one in Halo 5 isn't ever bridged. The level ends with Blue Team fighting not one, but 3 Warden Eternals. I already talked about how overused the Warden is, so I'm not going to beat that dead horse. At last, Chief and Cortana meet in person. He tries one last time to convince her to stand down and return home. His pleas predictably fall on deaf ears. Cortana paralyzes Blue Team, and she plans on imprisoning them until her work is done. Let's talk more about this overall plot, because it's perhaps the most criticized aspect of this game. Cortana's turn to the dark side is not well handled. Halo 4 was dedicated to Chief and Cortana's relationship. It aimed to form an emotional connection between the player and Cortana. Halo 5 takes this beloved character and makes her evil. It was a very risky idea, and it's one that I'm not overly a fan of, but I think there is a world in which it could have worked. It could have been compelling to see a story where Chief has to grapple with losing Cortana all over again in an even worse way. However, a story like that requires great care. Fundamentally, it requires time. The player needs to see the transformation of Cortana gradually, or at least naturally. They need to see her transition from the lovable friend in the prior games to power-hungry dictator. I think some of the seeds were there. The game could have leaned even more into Cortana's resentment for how AIs are treated, and really used that as the lever for her turn. The same lack of development goes for Chief. He, with the snap of his fingers, accepts that Cortana is a threat and needs to be dealt with. We don't really get to see him struggle with turning against his most beloved friend, even if she has gone evil. And that's the chief problem. Because we don't see any of this development on screen for either character, they come across as entirely different people than the ones players fell in love with throughout the franchise. And that comes across as a betrayal. It's not just a writing quality issue. Unfortunately, the issue is more fundamental than that. A story with this much character change deserved an entire game, but instead Chief and Cortana are given 3 out of 15 missions in the campaign. There is just no way to build up these character changes believably in the space of 3 campaign missions. There's no way when the game dedicates so little time or attention to this plot that it doesn't come across as feeling artificial and rushed. Here we see another example of Halo 5's ambition clashing with a lack of focus. The plot here is incredibly daring, but the game lacks the focus required to pull it off. The game is pulled away to explore other plots like Osiris, the Covenant Civil War, settlement life on Meridian, and so on. Like I talked about with the gameplay, the lack of focus makes these elements compete with each other, so none of them can thrive. With Blue Team down, it's up to Osiris' team to stop Cortana. As they advance, they see the sheer number of Guardians that Cortana has at her disposal. After the destruction of Meridian from a lone Guardian, this vision gives us a powerful glimpse at the stakes of this fight. Again, Halo 5's environments do a great job of further telling the story. During the fight, Cortana taunts Osiris. She digs into their pasts and makes barbs to mess with them.
Olympia Vale, the little genius girl who only wanted Daddy to love
That's
her.
Spartan Vale. And if you're reading my psych eval, you know it takes more than my father to get to me.
And yet...
This feels petty and cruel-hearted for her, but I already spoke enough about her character transition. More importantly, none of these jabs really resonated with me as the player, because I still didn't feel like I knew the members of Osiris. Cortana may as well have been taunting strangers. There are a few moments throughout the game dedicated to building the characters of Osiris, but they are too little and too infrequent. As I've been talking about, Guardians is pulled in so many directions, and it just doesn't have the bandwidth to establish Osiris effectively. Osiris fights on, and they help the exuberant witness wrench control of the cryptum away from Cortana. However, she still gets away with her Guardian, and this won't stop her from enacting her plan. Osiris frees Blue Team, but they can't move fast enough as Cortana continues her work. She and the other AI shut down everything from Earth to the other colonies. Cortana finds the Infinity, but Lasky is quick on his feet, and the vessel escapes into slip space as her Guardian unleashes an energy blast, which appears to shut down Earth's power. The Infinity continues to run away, deciding to fight another day. The game ends with the final scene of Chief and Locke reuniting with Halsey on Sanghelios.
It took you long enough?
The campaign, at least to me, ends on an abrupt note. There is not really any payoff to speak of, no final encounter with Chief and Cortana, and no closure between Chief and Locke, or anything of the sort. It's clear that Halo 5 is setting up a sequel where Chief, the Arbiter, and the UNSC team up to stop Cortana, who is now actively a galactic-level threat. I've talked a lot about this game's pros and cons, so I want to pull everything together. Halo 5 Guardians is a campaign with undeniable ambition. It's a game that radically changes the series' classic gameplay format, and it aims to deliver a story not only wider in scope, but a story so daring that it tries to subvert perhaps the most loved relationship in the series, that between Chief and Cortana. Unfortunately, Halo 5 lacks one key thing to make this ambition work: focus. Halo 5 is an unfocused game that doesn't know what game it wants to play as or what story it wants to tell. Halo 5 merges the mechanics of a movement shooter with a squad-based tactical shooter, and they fight against each other. The story aims to develop two squads simultaneously, with neither getting enough spotlight to truly shine. The story fosters a sense of mystery, then that feeling of suspense dissipates without adequate payoff. The story darts from UNSC colonies to Sangheli civil wars, yet it fails to give enough care and respect to what should be its central plot, that of Cortana's transformation and Chief's handling of it. Halo 5 is a game with sparks of brilliance. The environmental design infuses the world with such vibrancy and a sense of movement, and this pairs well with Halo 5's wider depiction of the universe. There's true imagination and creativity with some of the plot points, such as Sloane, an AI with rampancy running a human colony. The Spartan abilities may not be to everyone's taste, but I think in isolation, they're implemented expertly. Halo 5 makes a lot of improvements from Halo 4. For instance, there have been big improvements to the Promethean faction, which is significant considering how much time we spend fighting them. However, Halo 5 doesn't feel like a step forward. It feels like a step sideways at best. Halo 4 had such a focus on Chief and Cortana, and their sidelining makes Halo 5 feel less like a direct sequel and more like a spin-off. It doesn't feel like Halo 5 is the natural progression of the story, if that makes sense. It doesn't take the baton forward, but instead in an entirely different direction. I keep going back and forth on the pros and cons, and I think that gets to my bigger point. When people talk so negatively about Halo 5, it does bum me out a bit, because I do see the potential in a lot of the game's elements. Guardians is a game with ideas. However, nonetheless, the negativity towards the game is perfectly understandable. Halo 5 shows that ideas by themselves aren't enough. Ideas need to be nurtured in order to flourish. Otherwise, no matter how much potential they have, they will fail to resonate with players. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please consider leaving a like or subscribing. Both really help the channel and boost the video in the algorithm. Sharing a comment is equally as important, and I love hearing your thoughts anyway. I try to read all of them. If you want to support me further, please consider checking out my post-apocalyptic series, The Northfield Saga. It's a dark science fiction story about a man blackmailed into an assassination mission, not knowing that his target holds the key to saving the world. The ebooks are $1 each right now, and each sale and review leave a giant impact, more than you know. Either way, thanks as always for all the support. Have a great rest of your day. Until next time.